Does it work for your lifestyle? Because whatever helps us stick to a diet is really what's going to work and going to cause us to be successful. This is a really good question. And in fact, I'm kind of teasing you guys with it because we don't have a great answer. There are no studies that I'm aware of that actually will match the total calorie intake between two diets, and just to look at the distribution of meals and see if there's a change in inflammation, if there's a greater reduction in inflammation, oxidative stress, an improvement in the lipid profile, a greater increase in autophagy, and look at all these things against two diets when calories are held equal and when meals are distributed in a conventional way versus intermittent fasting. And that's the important thing we want to look at, is total calorie intake. Because again, just reducing calories and just putting yourself in a deficit to lose body fat can do all these things as well. So does this happen? Does this ramp up to a greater degree when we are spreading our meals far apart and doing this intermittent fasting thing? And that's not really something that we can answer. In theory, I would think that to some degree, you might get more benefit. You may get more autophagy. Obviously, ketone levels are going to be higher if you're going a long space without eating, as opposed to having little meals broken up during that period. Okay, but it's all theoretical. And until we have those studies to really look at, all I can say is, okay, there's probably going to be a greater production of ketone bodies. Is that going to translate to greater levels or greater improvements in oxidative stress, inflammation, autophagy, all that? Not 100% sure, but theoretically, you may say, there may be some increase, but there may be some greater benefit. How big is that? I have no idea. Again, this is all theoretical. It's a really cool question though, and I can't wait till they have studies where we can actually look at this. And now let's talk about, now that we've gone through that, let's talk about the downsides, because this all sounds really great, right? I mean, even if there's a chance that I can get a greater benefit through intermittent fasting than through just restricting calories with regular conventional distribution of meals, I might want to go that route. So what are the downsides? What's going to keep me from doing this? And the answer to that is people who have blood sugar issues, right? I know for myself, I tend to get hypoglycemic when I go a long time without food. And that can be really difficult for people. And it can be dangerous to go long periods of eating if you tend to have that issue. So people that have blood sugar issues may, specifically hypoglycemia, may want to avoid that. People who are grazers, right? Some people love to graze throughout the day. They love their tiny, small meals and they can't eat big meals and they don't like that. So for those of you who like to snack, this probably isn't the best diet for you. If you're active, right? If you require a lot of fuel, it's probably going to hurt your performance if you're practicing intermittent fasting and you're not having a good meal either before or after that workout. And of course, those of you guys who are not dieting and you're eating higher calories, you're interested in the health benefits, but you have a lot of calories to get in, you may not be able to squeeze all those calories in that short feeding window that would be required if you're intermittent fasting. So that's just kind of the reality of the situation. And then of course, there's the question of muscle loss. Am I going to lose muscle if I go 18, 20 hours without eating? Now, studies seem to show that no, you're not just going to automatically atrophy and there's not going to be a big deal. Is it going to be, though, slightly superior to distribute smaller protein meals that would activate muscle synthesis pathways and help reduce muscle breakdown? Because it's the net balance between increasing muscle synthesis and then reducing breakdown that matters, right? It's that net balance of the protein you're getting and how that's working with muscle breakdown. It may not be quite as good for that. It may not be, but is your muscle going to just atrophy off? Is it going to be a huge deal? No, it's not going to be super significant, especially when you're talking about a window of, 18 or 20 hours. That's really not going to be a big issue at all. Now, if you're doing an extended intermittent fast and you're going up to like 2 days without eating, that's when things get a little bit hairy. Like, studies have shown that there's an increase in muscle protein breakdown between 15 and 30 hours after starting a fast. And so then it's going to really ramp up from there. So if you are a person who is a hard gainer and you've been working really hard to put on muscle and retain any muscle you can build, then I wouldn't necessarily recommend intermittent fasting. That may not be for you. But again, a lot of people overstate the risks and just say, oh, you're going to lose all this muscle. And that's That is not the case. That being said, we've talked a little bit about who shouldn't be intermittent fasting, but now let's cover who is a good candidate for intermittent fasting then. Who should be fasting? And I think most of it comes down to, does it work for your lifestyle? Because whatever helps us stick to a diet is really what's going to work and going to cause us to be successful. If I can't stand getting little tiny fun-sized meals and I'm on low calories and I'm trying to eat every 2 to 3 hours, I'm going to fall off the diet wagon, and then it's surely not going to work for me because I can't stick to those calories. But if I wait to start eating longer in the day and maybe start eating at noon and get to eat 3 larger meals and stop eating at 7 p.m., I'm not going to feel as deprived, and I'm going to be able to better stick to that diet. So those of you who are eating low macros in the first place may find it really advantageous to use intermittent fasting. Of course, people who don't work out, especially first thing in the morning, I find that people who work out first thing in the morning, that's very hard for them to intermittent fast because a lot of people like doing their fasting in the morning times. And obviously, if you're going into a workout, especially like an intense weight training workout, not fed, you're going to subject your body to a little bit of catabolism, not a big deal. But mostly the biggest problem here is that you're not going to have the energy that you would have had you have eaten. So your workout's not going to be as good. You're not going to be able to burn as many calories in it. You're not going to be able to push as much weight. And that's going to result in probably less volume over time. And you're not going to be growing as much muscle. Okay. So you're just not going to be as successful in your workouts. So I don't really advise that people who work out first thing in the morning should be intermittent fasting unless they can fast at night and break that in the morning. And especially if they can't have a good post-workout meal, then I really wouldn't recommend it. You have to be at least eating before or after. This is just important, okay? So people who have great blood sugar control, of course, and can manage not eating a long period, that's going to be good for those people. And people who just want to break a mental addiction to food. Because let's face it, and I can speak to this. When I was an athlete and I was training for fitness competitions, I don't know if that necessarily qualifies as being an athlete, although I was in college. But in my more adult years after college, I did a lot of fitness shows. And back then, when I did it, we're talking about 2007, 2008, it was very bro. I mean, the whole thing was you need to be eating 6 meals. I was on super low calories, doing a lot of cardio. Most of my food was protein. I had some vegetables, not a lot of fat, some fat, but it was like carbs were totally off limits. And anyway, I found myself eating, these bite-sized 200-calorie meals. And then I had my little alarm clock and I would time it for 2 to 3 hours later. And by that time I would be just starving, and all day long, all I could think about was food. Physiologically, I was hungry. So of course I was thinking about food, but I just had this mental addiction to it, and my whole world revolved around eating. So for those of you guys who, and even if you're not training for a show, but you just find yourself constantly grazing, constantly thinking about food and your next meal, maybe intermittent fasting would be a great thing for you to kind of train your mind to think about something else for 14 to 18 hours, and then just fit all your meals into 6 to 10 hours. You're not going to be able to eat in that long period where you're not eating, so you're not going to be fixated on it. You're training your brain to think about other things, but then you can really fully enjoy your meals during the time you get to eat. It can be kind of a fun challenge for people. So again, just to summarize it, it really comes down to what you like. There are people who love intermittent fasting. Some people who even work out in the morning and they'll break their fast at least after the workout. And they think it's worth it for them. They still feel like they have enough energy to get through their workouts, and it's going to help them stick to their diet. So that's obviously going to be superior to anything else. Anything you can stick with that's going to be the most successful diet for you. One more thing I want to say about this, something that you guys need to keep in mind, is intermittent fasting is not magic. Yes, your physiology changes. Yes, how your body uses fuel and what type of fuel your body runs on changes. And a lot of these processes do change, but it's all explainable. It's not magic. We don't know if it's due to just the pure calorie restriction alone, because a lot of it is due to that, or if you are getting greater benefits from intermittent fasting, a little bit still up in the air. Just keep in mind that, and if you're not fasting an incredibly long time, like let's say you're only fasting 16 hours, how much benefit are you going to get from that? Odds are not that much. You're restricting calories, so that's great, but you're not going to be ramping up ketone production to any huge extent unless you are an avid exerciser and your calories are super low in the first place and you didn't have a lot of glycogen to burn through. So remember that the benefit you get from that may correlate with the length of time that you intermittent fast up to a certain extent. Obviously, if you start fasting like more than 2 days, this is where problems can occur. This is where maybe you might experience problems with thyroid hormone starting to drop, with muscle loss, stuff like that. So there's kind of a sweet spot. You do not want to get too far into it.